have a prolific set of panelists here. The first panelist is well-known novelist and columnist Shobhaa. She is best known for her depiction of socialites and sects in her works of fiction, for which she has been referred to as the Jackie Collins of India. She is a social commentator, opinion shaper, and an author of 25 books. In 2010, Day and Penguin Books created the publishing imprint called Shobhaa Books. Our second speaker is Anuradha Raman, a journalist who has worked with the Hindu, Outlook, and Indian Express. Most of her time and energy have been taken up in tracking media, especially at several attempts made by successive governments to control media. The third speaker is film critic Mayank Shekhar, who happens to be the first film critic to win the Ramnath Goenka Award. His ongoing podcasts and shows, Sit with Hit List and the Bombay Film Story, have won multiple prizes, besides securing a wide audience online. Having served in the founding editorial team of Mumbai Mirror, then as national cultural editor with Hindustan Times, is currently entertainment editor with Midday newspaper. The moderator for this session is Nandini Ramnath. Nandini is a film editor for The Scroll and has previously worked with Mint, Time Out Mumbai, NDTV, and the Indian Express. I would now request Nandini to take over the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. Thank you all. And I'm really honored to be here. And I've been listening to some bit of the previous session, and it's quite fascinating. I wonder whether film journalists and film critics have different challenges than are faced by political journalists, which I hope our session can sort of cover today. I would like to start off by asking Shobhaa, who at the astonishingly young age of 23, founded a film magazine, Stardust. Shobhaa, what was the idea of access to film stars and film talent mean in those years? And did it change over the years?
To start with, I can't hear you terribly well. So I'm just reading your captions and I'm trying to respond to what you asked. Now, to put things in context, Stardust just completed 50 years.
Wow.
So 50 years is a long time to be a game changer, which they continue to be. I was the editor for 12 years. About the access, I don't think the film industry worked in quite the way we are talking about it in today's context. It was a pretty insulated world. It is a world which is a planet or a universe or a galaxy in itself. And though there were early filmmakers who were making what were called socially relevant films, and there were people who were making films which are leftist in content, but there was absolutely, as far as I remember, apart from a few squeaks and squeals here and there of some kind of a protest, the film industry had very little to do with government per se, and very little to do with netas, and very little to do with, for example, lobbying for favors in Delhi. Of course, during the emergency, it was a totally different, the whole story changed with film journalism, Stardust, all of us being targeted by the then Information and Broadcasting Minister. But we spoke in one voice. The film editors got together and really valiantly fought back. We were subjected to censorship. Every single piece of whatever we were planning to publish had to go through Mr. Binod Rao, and it would come back, most of it slashed. Perfectly innocuous things were slashed. But that was a freakish and very unfortunate and terrible time for journalists across the board. It wasn't about just film journalism. But the Bollywood in itself, it's an industry that believes in matlab. So it's very matlab based. And I would say that the government needs Bollywood much more because of its soft power, or even the South industry much more than the other way around. They need the pull of stars. They need them to campaign. They need them to generate excitement. And in return for those favors, some of them get Rajya Sabha seats and various other concessions. But Bollywood is not the entire film industry. I mean, we have extremely powerful industries, whether it's down south or it's in Maharashtra, Bengal, Karnataka. I mean, so many states have extremely powerful ways of expressing themselves through cinema. So to restrict it just to Bollywood is, I think, we are restricting ourselves, and we should think beyond Bollywood. Bollywood has a sympathico relationship with whoever delivers for them, whatever that may be, licenses, maybe going soft on certain films, or if you're not playing footsie with the government, then come down harshly on the filmmakers and the stars who are seen as not being cooperative. That's an old thing. It's not new, and they somehow manage their own settings in their own way, however that works. But now what used to be, yes, always was a kind of hydra-headed monster. There were many, many aspects to dealing in the movie business. Now it's very blatant that the kind of message that's going out is you have to make nationalistic films. The films have to be rooted in whatever the government describes as Indian culture. They are being subjected to scrutiny of a ridiculous kind, where scenes are being slashed or cuts being asked for, like Deepika Padukone's tangerine-colored bikini was called a saffron bikini. Pathan was targeted. Attempts to lobby people on social media, trolls, to hit certain stars and their business interests. All this is happening on a scale that didn't exist 50 years ago. Or if it did, maybe it was more surreptitious, but it certainly wasn't so in your face as the message that's going out to the film industry today.
Yeah, many interesting points covered here. Mayank, what has been your experience over the number of years you've been, because you entered the film industry in the 90s, am I right? At a time when it was set to be changing its ways. So what are your experiences?
Yeah, I mean, well, thanks for having me. Firstly, it has given me an honor to be part of the discussion. And the second last session, if I'm not mistaken, I've been hearing it since the beginning. So it's a lot like the last page of India Today, right? I mean, this is where the entertainment is, the froth and the fun is. Hopefully, we're not facing those issues that business and politics and clearly, as it turns out, in sports is. Nandini, to answer your question, I think the time that I came in, I could see remnants of the world that was changing. And I'll restrict this to film reporting as I saw it. Of course, everyone has a different experience depending on what their motivations are and where they are in general. And I could see how that world that existed right before me, which would be the 90s and leading, moving up from the 80s, was a completely incestuous world where all the reporters were literally best friends of the stars they reported on, and they literally were dining and chilling, and which may not have created great journalism, but that access at least led to stuff that they knew for sure, and which if I was them, I'd be just writing books on everything that I've seen and heard now that I'm old enough to be able to do it, right? Of course, the other thing that I saw, and this is post-liberalization, and these were the early days, and of course it got cemented over time, is the whole, the PR machinery that eventually took over. And what was once a niche film reporting business, where you had these fanzines and the Stardust and the film fairs of the world at one end, and you had these film industry trade analysts who themselves figured out what the box office numbers are going to be, and they got ads from the same companies and the same filmmakers, and they sort of put out the business reporting of it. That became far more mainstream as a result, purely because you had these, post-liberalization, you had all these new products. They were being endorsed by these movie stars, and there were these colored supplements. They needed colored ads. They needed something to fill that space between those amazing new products and those stars. So there was far more interest in entertainment reporting when I entered the field, which obviously, as I told you, led to a PR machinery that became very important. And the second big change that took place, of course, was MediaNet, right? I mean, at some point in the politics discussion, I remember Mr. Umakant Lakera talking about how in vernacular or, well, non-English press currently, you have these reporters in काम है विज्ञापन भी लाना और reporting भी करना, and जो विज्ञापन लेके आता है वो reporting करता है. The fact is that has been going on in entertainment reporting forever, now that I know of, right? There is literally a department that will take money from you and position that as editorial, whereas it's supposed to be an ad. And the film industry itself was very happy to pay and put out that information in the best way that they wanted, right? So that was paid news in a way. It was first legitimized in entertainment reporting, or you may call it film reporting. But in India, film is really music also, and film is also now endorsements, products. So it's show business in that sense. But that's the world I walked into, and that's the world we all knew. But I also think, having heard the other speakers in this amazing conclave, I think the basic rules of journalism don't change regardless, right? It'll always be about asking the right questions. It'll always be about being interested or being interesting also at the same time, and blah, blah, blah. That hasn't changed. There are two big changes that have taken place, and that I think is what I hope to talk about in this session. Well, one is to first define how is film reporting different from other kinds of reporting, right? Whether it's sports, politics, or business. I think the one big difference that I see is that this is genuinely soft power, which is an oxymoron. Okay, I mean, you can either be soft or you're powerful. So they're really not that powerful. And in my personal experience, it's been like I managed to say exactly what I wanted to. Because what are they going to do? They can't jail me. Right? These are not sports federation with a politician who head it, so they can screw me over, right? Yeah, they won't talk to me. That's the worst they can do. Don't give you access. But access has always been tough. I mean, in India, because we're in Mumbai, and Nandini, you know that really well, and because we kind of know them from a closer quarter, it's slightly easier. But like in the West, it's impossible to get anyone. You got 3 minutes, 4 minutes when you get a slot. So access is not the problem, right? So that's one. That leads to one good thing. I think you have far more freedom because they're not vicious. They also because they're not really powerful, right? But it leads to the other thing, which is something that Sankarshan mentioned, and I thought that was well put, is they can be used to bury citizens under, I'm quoting him, under this a blizzard of bilge. They can be used, and so that's a big change that has taken place over the past 2-3 years, which has been really bizarre. And where film personalities or entertainment or showbiz has been the center of it, which I've just looked at like, what's going on, right? The second thing, I think, to do with how this is different from other reporting is that this is one arm of media reporting on another arm of media. Film or, everything you watch on screen, film is also television, film is also OTT. What's the difference between OTT industry and Bollywood? Is the same thing, at least so far as Mumbai is concerned, right? So effectively what's also going on, and that's a new change, is what is happening in one arm of media, which is journalism, and all that is going through is also what films is going through, and we are trying to report that. And the level of control that politicians seek at this point is, it may be easier for them to gain in journalism, or maybe they have already maxed it or they've already cracked it, but they're trying just as hard to do it on the other side. And it's leading to the same level of censorship that's affecting the reporting that you wish to do. So I think these are the two big changes. And of course, the other things that have happened are the realities, and we'll live with it.
Yeah, many interesting points, and we hope to come back to this. But I would like to bring Anuradha in at this point. Anuradha has a completely different perspective because you have actually, you're reporting on policies that directly or indirectly affect the movie business, especially with the censor board, the CBFC. What is access meant to you? And is access government agnostic, irrespective of those who are in power, or does it really depend on who is sitting right at the top?
Now, before I take your question, Nandini, there were 2 points that I found very interesting. One raised by Shobhaa Day, and the other one was Mayank. Now, Shobhaa, I hope I can call you Shobhaa. Shobhaa said that now there are cues from the government to make nationalist films of a certain type. And Mayank said, access is not a problem now as much. Did I understand you correctly, Mayank? Did you say access is not an issue?
No, I'm saying access will always be a problem.
Okay.
And it's even a bigger problem if you go to other countries where there are more established show businesses.
Okay. So, you know, when Shobhaa said there's a queue to make nationalist films, and she went back to the emergency time, at least that time, you knew who was calling the shots. You knew there was an INB minister. You knew that there was an all-powerful INB secretary who wanted something cut or something, you know, to be aired. Now we have a scenario where we really don't know who's calling the shots here. It could be a political party. It could be a small little fringe of a mainstream party, which is calling the shots. Number two, we still have, like you said, you know, I've spent all my time actually looking at how are films really certified? Who are the people who appoint the censor board members? How is the CBFC? How is the chairperson even appointed? Do we have any idea of how these things even happen? And how, I mean, is the process of granting certification to films a transparent process? We don't know. We really don't know, because the CBFC has members. It could kind of certify a film, and then some quarter might raise objections, and then some scenes would be demanded to be chopped off, like it happened in the case of Bheed, which became, you know, which came into real public domain. So these are the things that are really challenging for, this is what I understand by access. Do we have access to this information? Because I think, I know probably Mayank and Shobhaa, you know, accessing actors is one thing, because as she said, it's a matlabi equation, and, you know, you write something nice, he or she will open his doors to you. But do we have any sense of access to who are the people who are actually calling the shots? Who are the people who want a certain film to be made? Who are the people who are certifying our films and then saying that it is fit to be distributed and consumed by people like you and me? There is no accessibility even now. There wasn't any back then when I started covering the ministry, and you know, and that would be 2000. And it's much worse now, because now you don't have a minister, you have parties, you have anyone who can take exception to anything. So this whole accessibility, I think, can be seen only in a very tiny little context of how accessible is an actor or an actress to you, or a film director to you. Beyond that, I don't think we enter into a gray zone.
So Anuradha, I mean, for film journalists, access typically means you're either approached by a publicist, or you approach a publicist and say, I want to interview a star. And sometimes if you have a good equation with the star, you get the interview on your own and so on. Just for people like me, what do you actually, like, how have you actually covered ministries? I mean, we have this idea of you sitting on a bench outside a cabin waiting for some joint secretary to turn up.
Which is so true. Which is so true. But before the joint secretary, you have the guy who gives chai to the joint secretary, who then tells us who the joint secretary is sitting with and talking to. It could be an actor, it could be a director, you know. So yes, it does involve hours of just waiting out patiently. But it is actually to understand before, let us say, when a guideline for film certification is debated upon, and before it goes to the cabinet, it is there that the joint secretary films, you know, we have a designated joint secretary for films. It is there that he becomes important, because it is to understand how a certain, you know, why don't we still have, for instance, just to give an example, proper certification along the lines of FCC for film certification. We just have a UA. We're still debating. I think Leela Sampson committee report debated, and they came up with some certification rules. We're still going on with those old rules that were made in 1950. We don't have an age-appropriate certification of films. So the waiting outside the joint secretary actually helps me prepare my questions to understand how exactly are the rules framed for the consumption of films by the masses.
The description of Mayank Shekhar didn't include the fact that Mayank was also part of the censor board.
There you go.
I was getting to that.
By the way, okay.
On it.
Full disclosures.
Yeah, no. So I embedded the censor board for 3 years simply to understand how is it that it works. And that is the access I'm talking about, right? It's a piece I wrote for India Inc. when it existed, the New York Times website thing. And really, technically, and I'm pretty sure RTI applies, technically you should be able to get the full list of censor board members. And what you will find, or at least what I found then, is a majority of them are listed as social worker.
Yeah.
Now, technically, social worker can mean anything. We all do some sort of social work, but it's a euphemism for a party worker. So the way to load the censor board with members of a political party that is, the current government at the time is to call them social workers. And these guys take their job rather seriously. Right. I mean, for those who are watching this, if they want, because it's a long story, but I have written it and you should be able to find it online and on New York Times. But, Anuradha, I genuinely think that we've gone past that debate because now it's not about theaters anymore. I mean, what happened 2 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, where they, instead of, amending that IT Act, they went ahead and put out some new rules of a 3-tier structure passed by not the parliament, but just a diktat by the government, that any person anywhere in India watches any show right now, current, past, 1970, can have a problem with Sholay, he can write. And then there is a whole freaking machinery that will go after you. So they can switch it on. I'm not saying that's not how it panned out. That is not how they're going after everything that's coming out. What they did was that they have shown you that there is a switch. So I can switch this on, which means it creates a level of self-censorship that is beyond bizarre, right? Literally anything that you wish to write in terms of a series or in terms of film, you have to get this vetted by these people who are supposed lawyers who understand law. But what is this law to begin with, right? And it's being struck down one after the other, right? Now, if I want to do a story on this, I'm going to restrict this to film reporting. If I want to do a story, not one person is willing to talk about it, right? So I'll give you an example of a film called Writing with Fire, okay? It is India's first non-foreign category nomination for a feature ever in the history of Oscars. That's how momentous it is if you believe in the Oscars as being some sort of a mecca of the movies, right? No Indian has seen it in any legitimate platform, and it premiered at Sundance, won the top, well, not the top, but the audience award at Sundance in January 2021, right? Now, I can't even put this out as a real story because the person concerned is not going to say the reason why. Of course, but I've interviewed her, right? She tells me that a lot changed. This is, for those who don't know, this is a documentary film on Khabar Lahariya, which is the, all women Dalit, run by Dalit newspaper in Uttar Pradesh since 2002, if I'm not mistaken. It got into spotlight because of this film, right? I've had a word, I'm talking about 2 days ago. I've had a long conversation with the director, Rinki Thomas, who's telling me it can't be, right? It can't be because of the subject, because there's a person from Yuva Vahini, Yogi Adityanath's personal group, who's saying things which are frightening. And when this movie got its Oscar nomination is roughly when Yogi Adityanath got re-elected as, the triumphant, re-election in the UP polls. Khabar Lahariya disowned themselves from that film, although the protagonists were part of every film festival. They were, fated, globally and all those things, right? I am 100% sure that not one OTT platform in India right now wants to touch it, right? But I can't do a story. I have to do a column on it and just piecing it together because that's what it could be, right? So reporting suffers because the ones who are being affected by it can't say it. And I don't mean like, having your political opinions. Yeah. This is not about a political opinion. You are being censored, right? When that new IT rules came out, you just look at not one person from the films was there to say anything about it. I can understand you don't want to get in trouble for things that have nothing to do with you, but you make films and there's a censorship being imposed on it. Why would you not have an opinion on it? You can't even put that out publicly. So what does that mean? People like us have to write opinions on it or go on those. That's not what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to do film reporting, which is becoming harder as a result.
Sorry, Anuradha, before you, I'd just like to bring Shobhaa back in because I just want to, again, get a little bit of context as to what censorship has meant over the years. In the old days for us, censorship was about morality, right? It was about, oh my God, you've shown something so vulgar in your magazine. And vulgarity was the big obsession in the 80s and the 90s and even up to the 2000s. Shobhaa, could you share any interesting experiences you may have had in your years as an editor, as somebody who was at the forefront of a certain kind of new film journalism?
You know, my big problem is I can't hear anybody. I'm just reading the captions and responding to the questions. I'm sorry, I'm very techno-challenged. There's no one to help me out right now with this. So I'm just reading your captions. And, I guess you're asking me about how difficult it was back then with Stardust and the challenges of people telling you that this is vulgar, it shouldn't be in the pages of Stardust, the content is something that is going to corrupt the entire nation. Of course, you had all of it. And there were lawsuits also to deal with. And there was pressure, but nothing that was that unbearable that we couldn't fight back. And also, you must remember that Stardust had a very powerful voice because it was a very independent magazine. It wasn't currying favors from anybody. It wasn't holding at that point when I was there were no Stardust Awards, for example. So it's not that we had to go running to government to get permissions for anything. So the opinions were our own and we could stand by them and we could stand by our stories. And even in court, if there was a question of a defamation suit, etc., which there were quite a few, we could always defend ourselves. So Stardust was unique in that sense that we weren't dependent on anybody. But the story today and film journalism today, like I think Mayank was trying to explain, there are layers and filters and all kinds of agencies one has to go through to access a star, to even for an interview, or it's normally connected to promotional activity and that's it. And they're not willing to go out on a limb for anyone or anything. And certainly very, very few of them have political opinions, which they are willing to share. Very few. And the few who do dare go there are generally excluded. They're called troublemakers. And a lot of filmmakers won't sign them on. So playing footsie with government has always been difficult for Bollywood and for the movie industry on the whole, because movie stars do make very soft targets. They really do. You need them, but you can also slam them and you can put them in their place very, very easily if you want to. You can have their homes raided. You can go into their income tax records going back 20 years. You can informally let it be known through friendly producers that it might be better if you don't sign up so and so and so and so, because it'll be better if you sign up. In fact, the other person who is more in tune with today's thinking and will happily make films which kind of conform to the mood of the nation as described by the government in power. And I think it was in 2019 that the film industry, they chartered a plane. A lot of the top stars went and met the Prime Minister, and there were all the selfies and the jhappies and puppies and all of it. And everything was gung-ho because everyone was suddenly singing hosannas of what a great world we are living in. And the film stars at that point had absolutely no, what shall I say? No, it was almost cringe making what was put out there. And what the purpose of that was, whether they were in some way were coerced into that or they went on their own, there's no way of knowing because no one's going to tell you how that took place. But yes, I think Karan Johar did thank the Prime Minister profusely for cutting taxes at some point. And a lot of them do congratulate the Prime Minister or for whatever they think is worth congratulating, which happens almost on a daily basis. There's always something we want to congratulate our beloved Prime Minister for, the great and good he's doing for the country. So the film stars are quick off the block for doing all of that, but they will not even stand up for colleagues who are clearly being targeted for their either their religion or what they believe they represent. Not a squeak comes out of even the top stars when the film industry itself or a movie of a colleague is being so obviously targeted. That is a shame, because how does one speak truth to power? How does the film industry, unless they all get together and speak in one voice? And I don't see that really happening. There are too many vested interests, and each one is lobbying for something specific. They're not talking in collective terms of what is in the interest of the film industry. They are talking as individuals as to what is the interest that they themselves, that person may be seeking. And a lot of it has to do, I think, with the perception that is put out there on social media, like so-and-so, these stars seem to be with the government. These stars are being targeted by the government. This star has been finished off by the government. This star is likely to be targeted by the government, or this star's son is likely to be picked up on charges and thrown into jail, etc. So these are the sort of menacing tactics that are used, but never really addressed, because there's no way of proving any of these. It's just in the realm of conjecture. And even here, the film industry is not united. So the job of a journalist, whose side, whose version are you going to take? Because no one really is ready to speak about it. You'll be speaking to their PR agencies, and the PR agencies will be putting out sugar-coated sort of comments. No matter what you may ask them, they'll be only promoting the next film of the star they represent. So it is a real challenge for people who are reporting on cinema today, that either you go all along with the PR agencies or you don't get access, and that's the simple truth.
Yeah. Sorry, Anuradha, to come back to you, you wanted to respond to what Mayank.
Taking off from Mayank. Yeah. So, Mayank mentioned the IT guidelines, which have not even been passed by the parliament. The act was passed by the parliament, but the guidelines can be executed by the government, actually. So, and an RTI had revealed that the parliament has not been aware of any changes to the act made via guidelines. What I actually wanted to draw attention to were the guidelines themselves. The guidelines enable a Nandini or a Mayank or an Anuradha or a Shobhaa to take exception to anything under the sun. You may not like the way a particular actor has been, like the guy who has served a notice to Netflix because one of the characters kind of made some disparaging remarks about Madhuri Dixit. So the IT guidelines in many ways kind of enable anyone in the country to take exception to anything under the sun. But this again comes from our constitution, the Article 19.2, restrictions to free speech, which have actually made it empowered people like you and me to take exception to everything under the sun. And that's why you have defamation. That's why you have criminalization of defamation also happening. Now, I really think and the IT guidelines have been challenged in the court. The Mumbai court has kind of said it is not tenable, but despite that, the government has gone ahead because it is also a majority government that we are seeing now, So the challenge is really for film journalists, as well as for those who are tracking the government, would really be to see how far you can sift through, as Mr. Nayanan was talking about in the previous session, through with what is already there in public domain, what he talked about data. In our case, I guess what is there in public domain, we need to really apply our mind to that before we talk about, talk in terms of accessibility or what kind of accessibility we are really seeking for. I think that's what I wanted to add to Mayank's thing.
One question I have for all of you is, do you feel that the readership has also changed over the past few years? Some of us are doing what we've been doing since we joined journalism. Some of us have changed our tactics and platforms over the years. We've reached out to new readers through podcasts or other kinds of things. But do you find readers are still curious, still engaged, still willing to listen to what you have to say? Or are they sort of prejudging you as well as what you're writing about? Do you find more resistance from the readers in whose name this whole thing is being done?
Well, I think the beauty of, which can be true for other aspects of journalism too, but the beauty of entertainment journalism also is that, really, there is no barrier of entry, firstly, right? And everyone who has a social media handle is technically also a movie reviewer and is also, which is how it is across the board in any case, right? So I think we are moving more and more towards a creator economy. And we need to do more and more, even as media houses or as independent media professionals, to engage with the new technology. That's just basic hygiene work, I think. In a way, you could say your competition has grown because everyone films and sports is one of those things where everyone's an expert, right? So which also means that with the stuff you put out needs to have far more perspective, needs to have far more, because why am I reading you and not this guy? That's because maybe I've spent 21 years doing just this. So even if I'm a dumbass, I probably still know a little more than you, right? I mean, so there is that bit. Nandini, if you don't mind, I just want to just respond to Anuradha on this IT tool. I'm a little obsessed with it at the moment. It is so opaque that we were in a panel discussion at Picky Frames this time, and with a whole bunch of people who are content creators for OTT platforms. And there was a joint secretary of films. I'm pretty sure you know him, and he comes in and he tells us about how amazing he is because right before Family Man 2 came out, the night before, he decided to watch and he decided to pass it. I'm like, wow, does the Joint Secretary of Film pass a freaking web series? And how many shows are there in India right now? And who is going to sit and he got the claps, and I made sure he got the claps because we need more people like him. But the fact is, literally, it is that random. That somebody who's in the government can just watch it and pass it. At least CBFC will know who these members are. Technically, you can access that information. So it's a little more hardcore, which is where the fear comes from in the entire space, and which is why we are unable to report any of those apprehensions, because God knows who will do what, right? And it's just causing fear because anybody can do anything. So let's not do anything at all. Let's just do Sima Auntie, Indian matchmaking, much easier. Who wants to get into it, right? I mean, even with all that breeds, which is which sort of also the second film that won that got nominated for the Oscars. I mean, it does touch upon the Northeast Delhi riots, but I was like, okay, will any of these OTT platforms pick it up? Well, HBO did, but not HBO India. No, it would have played with Hotstar and still not there. So I don't know. So that fear is the fear that we've been speaking about in journalism exists in exactly the same form in the field we're reporting right now. So, which makes it slightly different from reporting on other areas that everyone's spoken about.
Shobhaa, have readers? How complicit are readers in what we are going through, and has readership in itself changed over the years?
I think what you just asked me was, am I in bed with my readers? I'm not.
No,
in that sense at all. How complicit are you? I didn't quite get the question.
Meaning, have readers themselves changed over the years? And
yes, of course.
Of critique, they too are.
Of course,
they too are.
Well, every single person who has access to a cell phone is a self-appointed critic, journalist, opinion shaper, maker, etc. So the competition is out there, and the competition is millions of people out there who have an opinion, sometimes far better expressed than what even you as a seasoned journalist and a commentator can hope to achieve through your writing and columns. And you have to acknowledge that. There are a lot of bright kids out there writing wonderfully well. I find their reviews, I find them extremely potent, hard-hitting, pithy, informed, It's not just reckless sounding off on anything and everything or name calling. There's a lot of comment out there which is worth paying attention to, and I do. But having said that, why would I consider myself still relevant? I think the entire argument about why some people continue to be relevant over decades, there's only one word for it, and that's credibility. If the people who follow you, who respond to you, are believe that what you're saying is from a good place, then you're likely to create your own niche, and that niche is something that's non-negotiable. And it shouldn't worry anybody that there are trolls out there. It doesn't bother me. I mean, I don't respond to trolls. I don't engage with them. So I've taken a position a long time ago, whether it's on Twitter or Instagram. I just do not get into that, because you don't know why should I be wasting my energy talking to or engaging with anonymous people. But there are those who get deeply affected by it. A lot of critics do. And that is one way of making them back off, especially if they have a huge following, to kind of create a sense of suspicion about their motivations, or they're on the payroll of someone. If you praise someone, then you're automatically on someone's payroll. If you criticize someone, then you're on the payroll of that person's, the person's rival. So if you're going to let any of these concerns affect the way you write, then it's really too bad, because you shouldn't. You should write your truth. And I think authenticity, there is no substitute for that. And most readers will automatically recognize it and respect you for it. So I don't really have an issue about negative stuff on any social media platform. I can deal with it, but I don't necessarily diss it back because I choose not to.
Right. Anuradha, I'll ask you to respond to this before we ask one question and then open it out to everybody else who might have questions. Anuradha, are you often called anti-national for basically reporting on a ministry whose decisions really matter to all of us?
Oh yeah, of course. Anti-national. I'm not called Godi media. I'm so happy for that. I'm really happy. Anti-national, I can live with. I can even live with prostitute, actually. I know General V.K. Singh made that very fashionable, but then, I can live with both. But the thing is now, just the explosion of the media space has enabled everyone to be, as Mayank pointed out, an editor, a reviewer, a critic. So even before the critic gets her act, somebody has an opinion which is already out there. And if you have an opinion that's different, obviously you are marked. But I don't think these things really affect or should affect us, when we write what we choose to write, because we do kind of write what we see. And we hope that we, in what we say in journalism, we end up annoying everyone rather than pleasing someone. So as long as you end up annoying everyone, I think we're all doing a good job. So, I'm happy with that. I'm really happy with that. Yeah.
So one question I had for all of you before there's a question that's been asked, and there may be a few more. Some of the stuff you have described sounds really dire and dark. We are thrashing about in the great unknown. There is fear around us. Nobody knows what's going on. There is an undeclared emergency, all these kinds of things. What are the ways in which individual journalists and media houses can sort of deal with this?
Do you want me to take
Anuradha, please? Yes, please.
Okay. I really think we should, as Shobhaa, as someone who has survived the emergency, so she's perhaps better qualified. I really think we should go about doing what we do. The only thing we expect is, at least those who are not independent, is the support of their proprietors, is the support of their editors. I think that support, having someone's back, and especially when you have to deal with defamation notices, is a big thing. Because I remember when I was in Outlook, the now Chief Minister of Bihar decided to sue me for 600 crores. But then, you had your battery of lawyers. So you have your organizational support. I really think we should get more and more combative. because what really is our goal, I mean, the larger danger that we see beyond censorship, beyond everything, is our attempts to divide. And I think that is where we really need to stand up. And if cinema is a language that expresses this, we should stand up for that kind of cinema. And we should write about what we see and what we do. I think we should go home.
Shobhaa, what are your thoughts on how can we combat what's going on?
Are you talking to me?
Yeah, how can we combat what's going on?
No, I just loved what she just said, because I agree, we need to be combative at all times. We need to be in sort of war mode, because otherwise we are going to be crushed. There is no question. And as she rightly said, we need the support of good editors. I have to add here at this point that today's editors themselves, no matter how wonderful they are, no matter how much they respect your work, no matter how many years you are a columnist with whichever media organization, they themselves are under so much pressure from their bosses. And it's never spoken, it's never put out there, but it is suggested gently that if you were to avoid this, you know, it might make life easier for me. I love it, but there's nothing I can do. And I understand the person who's the editor on the edit page or whichever page that person is handling is dealing with a whole bunch of pressures that me as a columnist, I am not. I'm expressing an opinion, and I'm hoping that it is a responsible enough opinion that the editor will let it go. But increasingly, I do get these kind of comments. Also things like, oh, avoid talking about this particular movie that's been launched this week because it'll harm the business interests of some of our other sister publications. And there's a policy in place that columnists do not talk about or criticize a big commercial a movie. So in which case, then you have to look for other platforms who are not that constrained by business concerns of this kind. And I haven't really found it at all difficult to have any of my columns published, not just in the mainstream media houses and their papers, but also on some of the other papers. But increasingly, the message is going through, there's no question. And it is very important that we stay in combat mode at all times and not relax for 1 minute thinking, oh, everything's going to be all right. Because I don't see anything getting and becoming any better. And we are not white bread. I mean, we are doing a job. We are there to comment on what we see. We're there to comment fairly and fearlessly on. That's primarily why we are given that space. So if we start compromising on that, then, well, I don't know, maybe then we should just stick to something much safer, switch to dentistry or something of that kind. But to certainly get out of this business.
Mayank, are you planning to become a dentist?
No. No, I mean, I guess this is a time agnostic conversation. You do you, as the Gen Z put it. You know, this is what you enjoy doing. This is what you and you hope that someone pays you for it. Honestly, I think one suggestion, and you know, as I pointed out earlier, what is happening in one arm of the media is what is happening in the other arm as well. So what's happening in journalism is what's happening in film. There is an amount of self-censorship that, you know, that's in place because of a certain fear or an uncertainty of what will hit you, right? Like this whole SSR case, I wish we could have a long conversation. How did that truckload fall on people? So, you know, they literally have a button and nobody knows what they'll do thereafter, right? But that said, I think in a world where we are, especially with stuff with culture and mass culture and movies, etc., I think there is a lot of opinion out there. It might be great to go back to film reporting. And because film reporting or like any other reporting can't be challenged. This has happened. This person says it. And, you know, I'm just putting this out. You may question what my intentions are, but you can't question a story is a story. So if I were to like think of it in terms of more proactively, what is a counter? I think reporting is the counter. There is no end to opinion anyway.
Yeah. There's one question from Poonam Singh who asks, history textbooks are being rewritten. What about films? Would anyone care to answer this?
It's a great question. I mean, my theory on this is that I think people, by and large, viewers know how to separate their politics from their entertainment. They're not, I don't think propaganda movies have a huge, I know one movie is done hugely well, and it certainly falls under the bracket of propaganda, propaganda being half truth, right? That was Kashmir Files, and everyone went gaga over it. But that's just one example. I mean, if people are really crazy about wanting propaganda in their films, and let's say they're huge fans of the Prime Minister of India. I mean, there's been like a movie plus a series. Nobody watched it. So I think in the long run, I have a feeling eventually entertainment is going to be insulated from these kind of things, that they'll have to look elsewhere. They're trying their level best. There's no doubt about it. There's a lot of money being pumped into the system. There's no question about it. But eventually it's the viewers and it's people who like to have fun for their movies. I'm like, who wants to go through this class? Right? And this Gyan Patti. So it may not work, is my hope and my belief, obviously.
Well, we live in hopeful times. I don't think I want each of you to just tell me about any personal encounter you may have had with censorship of anything. You don't need to name the persons or the film or whatever involved, and how you all dealt with it. Shobhaa, if I could please ask you about your personal encounter with censorship and how did you deal with it, which happened to you as an individual.
Personal encounter with censorship is, I'm sounding and looking like a dinosaur because it was a long time ago. It was Stardust, as I said, is 50 years old. Yeah. So the only one that I can remember very clearly was Vidyacharan Shukla attending our Film Editors Guild meeting, which was held. He was invited, and I think all of us were being very polite to him, but we were not falling at his feet, and we were just telling him like it was, that this is absurd. I mean, where do we come into this whole film the censorship thing, and why are you coming down so heavily on all of us? So he turned around and he said to me, "Madam, if you don't believe me and you're not going to change, I will hang you from a public square at Hutatma Chowk." I mean, and I burst out laughing. I thought it's a joke, or how can a person say that with a straight face? But he did. And at that time, we were all kind of taken aback, so no one challenged him. And I just laughed straight. I just laughed. So he didn't take it very kindly that I was laughing. And he said, "You watch what happens." So it was a direct threat made in the presence of all the other editors who kept quiet, because then they understood that he actually meant business. And then it was indicated in some manner that it was Sanjay Gandhi who was very upset with the way we were running our magazines and were running our publications. And all of Sanjay Gandhi's friends were together in this. And if we had any sense, we would make nice and be nice to Sanjay Gandhi's friends. And that was when actually the very, not official ban, but certainly an informal ban on Amitabh Bachchan. The editors thought it was the best way to handle it, that we don't talk about him at all. Because if we did talk about him in any way that was critical, then we knew where we would end up at Hutatma Chowk being strung up. So yes, that was a long time ago. I'm sure things have changed. But just one small point before we all run away, that unlike in Hollywood, where Hollywood is polarized, you know who suppose most of the film industry there, they are more liberal and they're pro-Democrats, and it's not a secret. Here, it's completely ambiguous. Because the film industry, with all its posturing of being liberals, they're not. They just sit on the fence. So you never know whose politics goes in which manner and who is going to be offended because of something, or who's going to suck up to which government in power and for what reason. I mean, the Shiv Sena notoriously did their job very effectively back then when Balasaheb Thackeray was around. and made sure that the film industry, they were like treated like supplicants. So, and they took it. No one challenged the old boy. And even today, some of that menace still exists because there are attempts to be wonderful theaters with gun stone. I mean, I've been at the receiving end of that myself, but nothing to do with movies. So I know what it's like. So having said that, when we're talking about propaganda, there's something like obvious, blatant propaganda, and there's subliminal propaganda, which not every viewer is capable of understanding how far-reaching that kind of propaganda and how much more dangerous it is. The obvious kind of propaganda, yes, anyone can see through that. And entertainment and propaganda, when it's a marriage that is done in a way that is so insidious, that's when we need to worry. And that's when a film critic's job is really key, to point it out to those who may not have noticed it, that this is exactly what this film is trying to do, is trying to create a certain divisiveness and hatred, and we must fight back. And that, if we fail to do that, then we really shouldn't call ourselves journalists and critics.
Yeah. Anuradha, briefly, your favorite story.
On censorship, I have two nice, happy stories, actually. One is, Mayank became a member. And Nandini, you were in Indian Express at the time when we carried out the story on, look who's there on the censor board. Somebody's auntie, somebody's cousin.
Yeah.
So the minister promptly called and he said, Madam, इतना आपको problem था, आप क्यों नहीं बन जाते board member? मैं बना देता हूँ आपको, TA दूंगा, DA दूंगा, सब दूंगा. So that's a happy story. Second story is when I was witness to the now dead, departed Sushma Swaraj. The movie was Monsoon Wedding.
Oh.
I was asked to go in. I mean, this was the central, CBFC had cleared it, but the minister had issues. Right at the opening scene, there's a sex chat happening in the movie, and somebody's panting, and Sushma is like looking at me and said, "ये नहीं चलेगा. हमारे घर में हमारे सास, ससुर, भाई, बहन सबको देखना होता है movie. ऐसा movie नहीं चलेगा."
That's the point of the scene.
Yeah. So, but then I was actually witness to censorship taking place as it never happened, I think, later on. I mean, she didn't. The occasion.
No, I think we watched a bit of, maybe it was cut. The scene was cut.
Yeah. And the day she had chosen to watch this movie was Karwa Chauth. So, it was like, I don't think it was. So yeah, these are the two.
That timing.
Yeah. So these are the two times when I actually saw censorship. Yeah. Two happy stories rather.
Mayank probably has like a book worth of them since you were.
Oh no!
What is your favorite?
Nothing compares to mine.
No, I mean, in terms of personal censorship, I'm not important enough for the government to bother about what I write. So that's never happened. At the censor board itself, you mean?
No.
In life, no. That is a daily thing. That's what we do as journalists. Yeah. There's some story that's being put out. Somebody who doesn't want it printed, they'll call you up, or it's printed. They want some changes. You just go through that every single day, and that's just part of your job. The fear is if there's something more than this, right? If you're being sent to jail or something, that's the fear, right? So no, I mean, there's obviously stuff that you put out that someone does not want out, and that's not going to stop. Thankfully, you figured out a balance where, okay, it's fine, we won't quote you, put a source in, or we just, those are the kind of things that we go through every day.
Right. Thank you all very much. And Teresa, I'll hand this over back to you. It's been a very illuminating session. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Nandini. Thank you, Shobhaa De, Anuradha Raman, Mayank Shekhar, Nandini, for this exciting session on the layers, filters, and nuances of film reporting, the real world that existed then and now, propaganda and censorship in the show business.